Loose Women star Gloria Hunniford is celebrating her 70th year in show business. Here, in an extract from her fascinating new autobiography, My Life, she talks of her 50-year bond with Sir Cliff Richard, who she accompanied to last year's Pride of Britain Awards, and the Hollywood superstars she has interviewed and befriended. Gloria, 77, reveals how Cliff helped her through the agony of her daughter Karen Keating's death, and how she fears he will never get over the 3-year torture of a sex slur. I first met Cliff in 1969 and a truly deep friendship exists between us. I would trust him with my life. So I felt utter disbelief when, in 2014, his Berkshire home was raided by police, with the BBC hovering in a helicopter to cover the shock event. Operation Newtree had been set up to deal with historic sex abuse allegations after the Jimmy Savile scandal, and Cliff had been accused of assaulting a boy of 15 at a Christian rally, 3 decades previously. I never believed the allegations for a second. I rang Cliff and said, "Sit down and don't say anything. This is what you have to do. This is the best lawyer for you." I was with him from the very beginning. Sitting in Portugal, watching his apartment being raided, Cliff fell to his knees and wept. A friend with him said, "Get up. You know you've done nothing wrong," but that was only the start of a nightmare. He was in a state of total shock. He had no idea who his accuser was, and there was little information from the police. He was appalled that anybody would put him through such agony. And so began nearly 3 years of torture. Friends kept going to Portugal to see him, but he was effectively imprisoned there. Finally, in June 2016, the CPS said there was not enough evidence and no further action would be taken, while the police and the BBC were both heavily criticized for their conduct. But Cliff was understandably tormented because he felt the CPS had left him open to no smoke without fire insinuations. How can there be any evidence for something that never took place? Even now he cannot believe what's happened. It literally eats away at him. He lost so much weight that when he hugged you, it felt like skin and bone. Cliff lost his joy for life. We were constantly on the phone and he went over and over the details because it was tormenting him. The impact on him has been so severe, and I don't think he'll ever fully get over it. Cliff only went back to that apartment once, for 5 minutes to pick up some clothes. Then he sold it at a loss. He's currently suing the BBC. In Cliff's case, nothing ever added up. The rally at which he was supposed to have assaulted someone actually took place 2 years after the accuser said. While he was under suspicion, others came forward to make false claims, including a serial rapist and a blackmailer, whose identities are protected by law. And, ludicrously, someone alleged that Cliff had roller skated into a clothes shop in Milton Keynes, assaulted someone, roller skated out and then roller skated back in 2 hours later to do the same again. Cliff had filmed his video for Wired for Sound wearing roller skates in a shopping center in Milton Keynes, and the accuser was clearly a fantasist. 6 retired policemen got in touch saying they were with him that day and he could never have been involved. Someone thought he'd be a good name to pick out of a hat. And the results have taken a devastating toll on a truly good man. Those of us close to him became very worried as we saw the physical toll it took. But I never doubted him for a second, and many people were hugely relieved when he was cleared. Cliff has come to my rescue many times during our friendship with his advice. After my daughter Karen Keating died from cancer in April 2004, the thought of Christmas was a nightmare. Should I still send cards and buy gifts? Cliff asked me if Karen liked Christmas and I said she loved it. He said, "Then go for it. Make it bigger and better than anything you've had before. Do it as a huge celebration for Karen and her boys." And so we did. Her sons, Charlie and Gabriel, and the rest of the family loved it, but, more importantly, it gave me the key to coping with all those significant events. It was typical of Cliff that he should come to the rescue with his advice. By this time, he and I had been close friends for about 45 years, stemming from those early days in Northern Ireland, when he agreed to do an interview with me, something that made an enormous difference to my early career. He came to perform a gospel concert in Lisburn, where I was living. Very few big stars were coming to Northern Ireland because of the troubles, so it was a very big deal, and I decided to see if I could get an interview. When I mentioned this in the office at the BBC, everyone laughed. But I had a trump card up my sleeve because socially I knew the vicar of the church where Cliff was performing. So I approached him. That night at about 9:30 p.m., the phone rang. Cliff said yes to the interview, the vicar said. I dropped everything, left the kids with my husband, jumped into my green Mini and was round there in about 5 minutes. As I walked into the sitting room, heavily pregnant, glad to see a very welcoming Cliff Richard, the vicar introduced me as Miss Hunniford. Knowing Cliff was a very religious person, I set out to make sure he knew I wasn't an unmarried mother. I've left my husband at home to look after the children, I quickly remarked. We've had many a good laugh about that since. I admired Cliff and his life values from the day we met and our friendship developed. We went to a lot of events and parties at his home, here and in Barbados. He is a good man and has always given 10% of his earnings to charity. He is a truly kind person. Cliff has an ability to make people feel better even in the most difficult circumstances. As we became closer we shared so much, and when Karen became ill, Cliff was one of only 3 people in whom I confided. I totally trusted him and found some solace because of his ability to chat things over. And his faith is so strong it gave me some strength to cope. Karen and Cliff always got on well, too. When she and her family were living in Australia, Cliff came to stay with us for 4 days and we all sang round the dinner table. I was able to unburden myself to Cliff, and Karen could, too. One night the two of them stayed up talking all night, and to this day Cliff has never told me what they talked about. After Karen died, Cliff sang Miss Unites at her funeral. And he quoted from the Bible about the greatest gift of all, love. He has been a great man repeatedly for our family.